Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dexon Pasaribu, also representing Pim Martens and Bagus Takwin. Today, we would like to present our paper titled The Role of Religious Orientation and Ethical Ideologies in Environmental Concerns Amongst Teachers and School Staff in East Java, Indonesia. We began our study with White's 1967 thesis, who said more science and more technology are not going to get us out of the present ecological crisis until we find a new religion or rethink on our old one. He meant this quite literally. Our question was, what are religion's perspective, awareness and compliance towards environmental sustainability? And how is it developed into that state and why? We would like to explain the background of why we initially chose the main variables in our study. We borrowed the most common attitude behavior theory, which is Fishburne-Azen classic behavior intention theory, as a way to present the big picture. Skipping aside the explanation of Fishburne and Azen, we would like to invite fellow researchers to the importance of the collective and individual aspects of a person. There are so many social groups or social institutions in our surroundings. For example, political party, ethnic group which has their own myth, folklore, tradition, culture, etc. There are also clique, or most common known as peer groups, gangs. We propose religion as one of the biggest and most significant social institution which promote the social norms, and religious followers adapt that social norms into their personal norms, and therefore it may affect their valuation of what's important and what's not important, or attitude, positive, negative, and affect their behavior, in this case environmental concerns. Our variable, the first one is forced ethical ideology, consists of ethical idealism and ethical relativism. Individuals scoring high on the idealism think that ethical behavior will always lead to positive consequences. Individuals who score high on the relativism subscale reject the universal moral principles and believe that moral decisions should be based on personal or situational analysis. We think that forced ethical ideology is very close and very relevant with religion, because with ethical relativism, the belief of one universal moral guiding principles, it's very close to the concept of God or deity. On the other hand, ethical idealism speaks about ethical behavior which will lead to positive consequences, speaks loud about religion's teaching of the do's and don'ts, the bad behavior and the good behavior. For religiosity or religiousness, we choose outward religious orientation, consists of intrinsic personal religious orientation and extrinsic social religious orientation. In intrinsic religious orientation, religion is deeply personal to the individual, such as the commitment to religious life and living out his or her religion, living by the code as a guidance, a moral guidance. On the other hand, extrinsic social religious orientation, the emphasis is placed on religion as membership in a powerful in-group, providing protection, consolation, or social status, and enabling religious participation. For our outcome variables, we choose environmental concern. We choose Thompson and Barton's 1994 concept of ecocentric and anthropocentric motives. They argue that environmental concerns stem from different motives, one of which ecocentric motives, the belief that the nature is important in its sakes. And the other one is anthropocentric motives, which they argue that the environment is important because it's the key for human survival. The important is human needs, human livelihood, human survival, and those three is very dependent on the environment. That's why environment is important. The next scale is general environmental apathy, which measures the apathy disposition towards the natural environmental. Our first working hypothesis is intrinsic personal religious orientation correlates positively with idealism and negatively with relativism. The second hypothesis is environmental apathy will negatively correlate it with ecocentric motives and anthropocentric motives. The third hypothesis is the continuation from the second working hypothesis. High environmental apathy, and consequently, if a person has high environmental apathy, then he has low environmental concerns, whether it's stemmed from ecocentric motives or anthropocentric motives. The high environmental apathy relates with a low idealism and high relativism. The fourth hypothesis is high extrinsic social religious orientation relates to low idealism and high relativism. Lastly, high extrinsic social religious orientation relates to high environmental apathy. There are only two fully accepted working hypotheses supported by our results. The first one, environmental apathy negatively correlates with ecocentric motives, both EEM and EBM, and anthropocentric motives. The second one, extrinsic social religious orientation positively relates to environmental apathy. Next, we found partial support for first working hypothesis. Intrinsic personal religious orientation correlates with idealism but not with relativism. Rather than operating as the extent to which an individual believes in universal governing moral principles, or low relativism, intrinsic personal religious motive, belief, and commitment may relate more to a principle with which individuals portray and justify their action as correct in order to achieve desirable or positive outcomes, high idealism. This result provides a notion where those who score high in relativism can also have strong commitment to religious belief. Next, partial support for third working hypothesis. Low idealism and high relativism relates only to environmental apathy. There is no stable relationship pattern that can be concluded between idealism and relativism with ecocentric and anthropocentric motives. We suggest that this may be because that two persons can have a very high environmental concerns but with a very different motives. A person may view that with or without human, the natural environment is important, while others may feel that human survival is the very context that gave meaning as to why the natural environment is important to him or her. Therefore, it is very easy to see that often there are no clear way to determine whether a person's environmental concerns stemmed from ecocentric or anthropocentric motives or both. Even purely in ecocentric motives alone, Amerigo et al. 2007 proves that ecocentric motives may contain anthropocentric valuation. For example, the biospherism EBM subscale in ecocentric motives scale talks about the importance of nature itself in itself. On the other hand, there are also subscale of the ego-biocentrism, the EBM, which talks about human self in nature, which is more or less the element of anthropocentric or ego in nature. We view that Thompson and Barton's general environmental apathy provide a critical middle ground to evaluate whether a person has environmental concerns or, on the other hand, has apathy disposition toward their natural environment. Partial support for fourth hypothesis. Extrinsic social religious orientation positively correlates with relativism but not with idealism. High relativistic individuals' moral judgments are adaptable, for they base their appraisals on features of the particular situation and action they are evaluating. The more individuals view their religious belief, participation, and practices as the means to an end for social motive, which is ES, the more likely they are to have high relativism. So for the ultimate question, does religion inhibit environmental concerns? Our result answers yes and no. When religion is deeply personal to the individual, such as the commitment to a religious life, living out his religion, guiding his everyday behavior, living to a code, then no. He will be more likely have strong environmental concern. However, when religion is viewed as means to an end towards social gains, the more likely he or she scores high in environmental apathy. This extrinsic social religious orientation, we found it relates more to religious social identity theory by Teichfeld, 1974. And I want to quick mention that Maranatha University has Dr. Terry Setiawan as one prominent figure in this topic. I would like to think that somehow we can collaborate more on the near future. So, to continue. Next, two components of religious orientation, which is intrinsic personal and extrinsic social, relate to ethical ideologies. Compared to ecocentric and anthropocentric subscales, general apathy subscale is more reliable to measure environmental concerns. And lastly, in predicting environmental concerns, religious orientation is more dominant and consistent compared to ethical ideologies. Thank you.